Thank you to the amazing panel. Going in after with an activity just after when you've been loaded with so much wisdom is not easy. So, but as the flow is, as Nikhil describes, um, I would want all of us to engage in a short activity. Since the theme of today's session is about explore your potential, and I think we heard some lovely phrases today from everybody, which is around, how do you expand the boundary of your bubble? How do you unleash yourself? And how do you get the best out of you? So, may I request all the participants today to do one small activity of reflecting internally and come out with or talk about one strength or superpower that they have. And all you have to do is mention the superpower either in the chat window or simply just rename yourself with that superpower. So, just to show how I would do that for myself, I would just rename myself with my superpower and say, so this is not my superpower yet, but this is my aspirational power. Yeah, but still, that's what I love to be. So why don't we have all the participants go to the participants list? They can simply put their thoughts in the chat, or just go ahead and rename themselves with their superpower as the first name. So we've got lovely responses coming in as well. Learner Latika, Exploring Bobby, Compassionate Mike, Passionate Prakash, Non-Judgmental, Lifelong Learning, Connected Anand, Flow in Presence, Tensing Sandhya, Consistent Rachel, Momentous Sunil, Mirror Johnny. Oh, this is so powerful. This is so amazing to have so many strengths and so much exploration. Unconditional Bhavna, Compassionate and Courageous Minakshi, Empathetic Samita, Compassionate Ravindra, Listening Lalita. So, as we all do this, may I also request all of you to come on camera and help us or let us take a small picture of everybody. And the way we can do that is we can try to shake hands with each other like this. And to me, this is not a shake hand, but this is like a butterfly sorts, which is again exploring its potential. And we all try to match the person next to us on the left and the right. I'm going to remove myself from the spotlight, but I will continue to be on audio. And yeah, it's lovely. Let's keep it on. Right. And we are going to the last one. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much. With this, I would like to invite Shanti again for another amazing panel with the industry leaders. and talk about their reflections and views about coaching and how they see coaching evolving in organizations today and the industry. Um, Over to you, Shanti.
Thank you so much, Kunal, and we are so delighted to have uh, a different panel, which we've got people from the business, from HR, and from L&D to talk about the other aspects. So we've been talking about the coach and the client. Let's look at the organizations and how they have nurtured, helped coaching grow, etc., etc., etc. Like I did previously, I'll invite each panelist to first invite Ipsita. Can we see Ipsita?
Yes, I'm right here. Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Very good. My slides won't move. Yes, there. So again, I won't read what's there on the slides. I'm going to talk a little bit beyond what's there on the slide. Ipsita is a seasoned talent and organizational development professional with close to 20 years of experience. She finds her purpose in domains of talent, capability, leadership, behavior, culture, employee experience, and learning technologies. She has a rich experience in setting up and leading talent, learning, and OD functions in mid to large size organizations across India, rest of APAC, including China, Japan, Vietnam, Taiwan, Australia, EU, Asia, and Africa. She spent a good part of her life in careers roles spanning from banking, financial services, retail, logistics, and the automotive industry. She has an extensive experience in supporting GBS and GSS environments, implementing high-impact leadership and organizational development solutions in large, complex, and global organizations with measurable business outcomes. She is also adorned with several awards. I'm going to read just a couple of them. The Avatar Seramount named TIAA as the 2022 100 Best Companies for Women in India. Ipsita was instrumental. Ipsita was also instrumental in the TIAA. India is Great Place to Work certified for continuously 2 years in a row. And TIAA was also recognized as among the best in India's workplaces in health and wellness in 2022. Again, all of these have been made possible because of Ipsita. Outside of work, Ipsita enjoys road trips across India with her photographer husband of 22 years and her 8-year-old son, sampling regional Indian food, reading travelogues, and collecting earrings. We don't see a fancy earring today. What's up?
You do. I'm still wearing a earring. You will never find me without one. But thank you so much, Shanti, for inviting me to speak to this group of very experienced and very esteemed coaches. Thank you for the invitation today. And I'm very glad to have heard Alan, Lenny, Nikhil, and the rest of the team here, their points of view. It was really informative.
Lovely. I will start with a question for you, Ipsita. What, according to you, does explore your potential mean from a parlance of employee and people managers?
Right. I'll harp upon a lot of things that the previous panelists really talked about. You spoke about discovering your highest self. You spoke about identifying the latent talent. You've spoken about perpetual versatility and how do you keep incubating that. We spoke about the preparedness that an employee or an individual has to get on the journey of identifying what their true potential is. I think for me, it's just all of that encompassed together. And as an organization or as a leader in an organization that supports identification of potential, both in self as well as in others, I think what's important for me is how do I empower that? What kind of mechanisms, systems, processes, platforms am I able to offer to my employee base that empowers them to discover their potential? What are the exposures that I can provide to the group? I think that's what is critical for me in my job. Exploring one's potential, like one of the panelists mentioned, your potential could be in 3 years to turn into a pilot. So also identifying what is the potential that you want to explore. I could choose to be a cook, I could choose to be a pilot, or I could choose to be a creative writer. I could choose to be a mathematician. What is the potential that I want to really explore? Identifying what is it that I want to do, what is it that my organization wants me to do, versus what is it that my manager wants me to do. And aligning all of this to really get to a point where, there was a comment that somebody put up in the chat today around really, I think the crux of the comment was about taking the horse to the water, but really the thirst is in the horse. So how do you help the horse identify that thirst? So yeah, that's what I think is identifying or exploring my potential in an organizational setup.
Thank you, Ipsita. We'll come back to you with more questions. Next up, may I call upon Sheenam. I did see her join. Sheenam, please wave your hand.
Hi.
Hello. So thank you, Sheenam. Again, not reading what's there on the slide while Sheenam is answering the question specifically for her. Let me introduce Sheenam first. She joined Broadridge Financial Services India Private Limited as a Chief Operating Officer in September 2021 and was appointed the Managing Director on April 1st, 2022. Sheenam is responsible to drive the company's India strategy that includes India Centers of Excellence across technology, innovation, professional consulting, and managed services and operations. Prior to joining Broadridge, Sheenam was the Vice President of Dell Digital Services and an APJ CIO leader at Dell Technologies. In her previous stint, she has led strategic businesses and technology roles at Finacle at Edgeware, an Infosys company, SAP and Oracle also. She's an ICF certified coach and is a lean and design thinking coach too, with wearing multiple hats, Sheenam. My question to you is, what does explore your potential from a team in an organization mean to you?
Awesome. Thank you, Shanti, for the lovely introduction. I must say it's a pleasure to be here. Alan, just hearing you in the previous panel brought back huge amount of memories for people in this group. Alan is responsible for me being a coach, for being excited about being a coach, and initiated the journey for me. He took me through the ACC and PCC journeys both together, right? So thank you once again, Alan, for that. What does explore potential for a team mean, right? I think Alan answered it in some parts, but from my perspective, right, as a business leader too, I think to me, a team now gets together to deliver various aspects of business. A team earlier, right, when we started off, was a group of individuals who were brought together to deliver something, but it was a group of individuals. We have moved that concept in our work areas in the industry today to say we need to deliver an outcome, and that outcome needs to be delivered collectively by a group of people, which means that as an individual, Sheenam is not successful if the rest of the people in her team are not successful. So I think that is a concept that the industry has now come up with and wants to nurture. And therein lies the opportunity for team coaching. While we were, exploring the aspects of coaching, one of the things that we explored very deeply in my previous avatar was team coaching at a team level, at a development team level. And why we were doing that? Because we were changing the way we were working, right? Somewhere you talked about lean and design thinking coach. The entire concept of lean is that you bring together a new team, which is a cross-functional team. You have a product owner, you have a scrum master, you have, the developers, you have testers, and you build a cross-functional team that is responsible to deliver a particular outcome to the customer directly. Now, if QA doesn't happen or dev doesn't happen or something else doesn't happen, collectively the team fails. So how do you take on, that mantra? Getting a new team together and working through that was something that I explored and found greatly successful as a team coach, because, we also launched at that point of time the concept of manager as a team coach. And, there were some fundamentals that we learned during the coaching process, which was, if you are a cricket coach, for example, or a cricket team manager, you stand outside the field and you observe, and then you do a retrospective and you tell people, what were the good decisions and the bad decisions. So really building all of that came into team coaching. The other place where I have, as a business leader, used team coaching is when you build new teams and at leadership levels, right? When I joined Broadridge, and on 1st of April last year, became the managing director of this company, I was replacing a legacy of 30 years. Imagine all of my leaders had grown up with my predecessor, and BLK had done an awesome job of bringing them where they were. Now, to become a part of the team, it was a new team because I was getting added in, okay? And become a part of that team, bring that team together and create a new team needed me to actually utilize some of the fundamentals of team coaching, and I found them really, really useful. So to my sense, I think organizations at large should explore team coaching when they're building new teams, or they're changing the purpose of the way they want to work, or they want to transform themselves in structure to deliver better outcomes to the customers. That's when team coaching will help.
Thank you, Shinam. And I think even ICF at a global level is recognizing the importance of team coaching, and with the team coaching certification, I think they're bringing it all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I invite Poonam Narang? Thanks, Poonam.
Hi.
Known for her authenticity, pragmatism, intellectual capacity, purposefulness, and sense of humor. We will check the sense of humor shortly, Poonam. Currently, she leads HR for emerging markets across 18 countries with evolving markets with large growth aspirations. She also leads HR for innovation business in Dr. Reddy's Learning, and finding answers to new challenges in capability, culture, and operating models. Prior to this, she set up and matured Shell's IT hub in Bangalore, growing it from a scratch to 4,000 strong, phenomenal feat achieved. Challenges involved, of course, talent acquisition, and she's part of Shell, not known as an IT company, ramp the IT up to scale, setting up HR processes and systems, defining and helping people build the smell of the place. I like that phrase, Poonam, that you used in your bio-focused development of local leaders and supervisors, defining HR priorities for nascent organizations. While people are reading the bio on the screen, my question to you is, how can coaching help exploring the potential at an organizational level?
Thanks, Shanti, for the rather flattering introduction. And I was listening in very keenly to the previous panel, made a few notes of my own. I've always been scared of being a coach because it seems to come with such a huge sense of responsibility. But some of the conversation that I heard in the previous panel was really inspiring. So thank you for that, all of you who spoke and shared some pearls of wisdom. I think in terms of potential from the perspective of an organization, it's a lot of what Shinam said, multiplied several times, because at the end of the day, the organization is an aggregation of individuals who work in teams and then subsequently become part of functions or business units. The only trick is that you don't want the aggregation to be a simple addition. You want that aggregation to undergo a process of, a multiplier effect. So you don't want a 2 plus 2, 4, but you're looking for a 2 plus 2, I guess 8 nowadays, and not even 5. So I think that's a challenge from the organizational perspective. And some thoughts that were going through my head when I was trying to wear an organization hat and think about coaching. I think organizations see it as a two-sided coin, right? So there is an angle of responsibility, because I think a lot of us spend a large part of our lives working and engaging with colleagues at the workplace, engaging with the organizational purpose and context. So there is a piece of responsibility around helping us grow personally and professionally in an organizational perspective. So I think organizations do feel a sense of responsibility to invest in coaching as a process and a phenomenon. But in turn, they also expect a return. Yeah. And I think that's where the conversation gets interesting, because in my experience, you have organizations that cut across a spectrum. There are organizations who've reached a space where they can trust coaching as a process and believe that just engaging in it will ultimately deliver the kind of outcomes and results which will result in a movement from position A to B. They don't necessarily want to quantify it in commercial terms. But there are also organizations who are not really in that space where they're happy trusting it just as a process, but they are also looking for commercial outcomes, maybe even a return on investment on something like coaching. So you do have a spectrum of organizations when it comes to how they approach coaching. And then, of course, there is this whole dilemma about can I make coaching a part of my culture so that every employee kind of experiences it in his or her interactions with people around them? Or is coaching something that I will kind of reserve for an elite section of my workforce, just because of getting the bang for my buck, because that's where business impact is probably the most. So I think those are some of the nuances when an organization thinks of coaching in terms of how they want to engage with the process, how they want to invest in it, etc.
Yeah, and Poonam, I do have specific questions on measuring the ROI and making coaching available to everyone and building a culture. But what I want you to start answering for me is how has your organization dabbled with coaching? And then we will move to Sheenam and then Ipsita.
Right. So at Dr. Reddy's, what we have been able to do is use coaching as a tool to address both techno-functional development areas. So we do get coaches who come in as functional experts and help you manage your work. But we also have coaches who come in to address behavioral or leadership gaps. And again, typically, formal coaching relationships so far have been limited to certain senior levels in the organization. We usually try to approach it in a very structured fashion. So in our own way, that dilemma about measuring the returns is kind of structured through identification of what are the 2 or 3 areas that the coach and the employee will focus on. So we kind of try and get as granular about that as possible. We do in the journey, which is typically 9 to 12 months, we do mid check-ins with the line manager and HR coming in addition to the coach and the coachee, just to get a sense of how the process is evolving. And then, of course, there is a formal closure to the relationship where we try to take stock of these are 2 or 3 areas that we'd started with. And, where does the coach feel the individual has moved and where the individual feels. So we've tried to stay away from a quantification in terms of a commercial outcome, but we've definitely tried to engage in a qualitative assessment of whether the experience has been helpful or not, and have you been able to move from point A to point B. I think what we are yet to do, and something that I would definitely want to table to the leadership team within Dr. Reddy's, is this piece about coaching as a culture. Can I invest in line manager capability and empowerment to the extent that the line manager feels or sees every moment as a coaching moment? And the example that comes to mind is many of us as parents, we don't really set up a meeting with our children to have the coaching conversation. It very often happens in the moment, there and then, and you kind of try to realign. And that's ideally what you would want between, say, a line manager and employee, or even within a team, the ability to have that conversation and ask the question, this is what you said, and how do you think it made me feel? Or this is what you said, and how do you think you came across? Uh, so yeah, I think that's where I would like the organization to be, but I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, we're all learning, growing, experimenting with different things, and hope to get there soon. Sheena.
So Shanti, for us at Broadridge, what I've done is that my senior leadership is actually going through an external coaching assignment. And unlike what Poonam described, the goals are really set by the leaders themselves, right? So what we did was that we went out and figured out which are the organizations that we could possibly be working with. I met the coaches personally and figured out went down to one organization. From there, our exercise of starting to coach was really matching the people, right? Our leaders and the coaches. So profiles were shared, options were given. They did, those day zero kind of meetings and figured out whom they would want as their coach. Having said that, the coaching itself, as the goals and stuff like that have been set up by the leaders. As a principal, I would not want to interfere with them. What I've done in the beginning of the exercise is I've given a brief about what are the nuances that I would want a leader, to improve on. But beyond that, I do not want to interfere, because I believe this is a very personal journey for my leaders, right? We are now in the process of taking that to the next level. We want to take the top talents from the next level to see how we can also get them the same level of external coaching. We do a lot of external interventions through what I would call as pseudo coaching or mentoring, in terms of goals that people may have for themselves. So things like understanding a finance balance sheet, becoming a better business leader and stuff like that. So those are very, very slotted kind of conversations. And in my mind, because I am a coach myself, I don't treat them as coaching exercises.
Yeah.
The third thing that we have from a leadership growth perspective is what we've launched a program, which is Leader as a Coach. So trying to see when do you become a manager and when can you have the opportunity to be a coach? Where can you disengage yourself with what's happening on the ground and see it from a neutral perspective and give a viewpoint, right? From your own experience perspective and stuff like that. Much like the example that I gave earlier about the cricket coach and the cricket manager, right? So that's something that we're trying to build as a culture. We're trying to build a culture of feed forward rather than feedback, which is also something where you try to explore your potential, really, right? And say, okay, this is what you can do in the future, rather than, oh, you didn't do this very well and you should have done this. So we're trying to move from a feedback mechanism to a feed forward mechanism. So those are the kind of things that the organization today is indulging in.
Lovely. I have a few questions for you too, but I'll come back soon. Ipsita.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a mixed bag between what Sheenam said and what Poonam said. In my organization, both the current one and the past organizations that I've worked at, there have been various points in time where coaching has come to be very advantageous, and of course, turning managers or helping managers to be coaches as well. Let me talk about some of those transition points. There have been instances where there's an individual who's moving from, say, a particular techno-functional role to a non-techno-functional role or a non-technology role. Or there has been a leader who's probably managing a regional P&L and going to look at, managing a global P&L. So some of those key transition points are typically places where we empower or enable our employees to kind of receive coaching to be able to see themselves from a very neutral point of view. So that's one area. The other area that I've spent a lot of time on is to support group coaching formats. We have a lot of leadership programs that address very critical competencies, for lack of a better word, in terms of being better aware as a leader, in terms of identifying what is my leadership approach, right? And in those programs, what I found a lot of usage is if we've got smaller groups of people together with a coach to talk really about themselves and become a lot more specific about the future. So that's another space where I have used team coaching or group coaching. And I know, Poonam, you've alluded to team coaching in the past as well. So that's one area. The third area where I've, mobilized this is in terms of enabling people to see outside of their silos. Typically in an organization, for example, TIAA, we're about a 3,000 member organization in India alone. So the cross-pollination of ideas really is only limited amongst those 3,000 people. So there are these platforms that we've tried to bring together where we can identify global coaches, people from my global team, who can turn into my coach or my mentor for a short period of time. And for a specific skill or a specific area of expertise alone. And we've built a platform for it, and that's got a lot of traction because people really have enjoyed the exchange of ideas cross-culturally, cross teams, and cross demographics as well. And I say cross demographics because we've also started this reverse mentoring or reverse coaching opportunity where we understand a lot of the fresh generation think differently. And there's a lot of catching up that while the fresh generation has to do, there's a lot of catching up for the erstwhile generations as well. So we've instituted the reverse mentoring or the reverse coaching opportunities through these global platforms. And the fourth area where I work on is in terms of specific demographics. For example, women in leadership is a massive challenge that we are trying to, address. How do we empower women to have a stronger voice at the table? And how do we make more allies out of men? That's one area where we've where we provided a lot of focused coaching interventions. Another demographic that I can talk about is the demographic or the people who've had a very fast career transition. Within 3 years have moved from, a level 3 to a level 6, for example, which is a 3-level career level movement or a career level jumps. How do we provide them that ability to see themselves as a more stable, as a more mature individual? So that's another area of coaching where we've really invested in our organizations. I also want to bring in the concept here of, the things that I struggle with a lot of times is, and I'll allude to what Alan mentioned in the past. A lot of our coaching opportunities are not really democratic. There are some that are democratic where you get to choose your own coach, you get to choose your own coaching sphere. A lot of it really happens through your talent reviews and performance cycles, where there is a manager who's telling, you know what, Ipshita needs to be coached on X, Y, and Z. Ipshita has a transition point coming up. Ipshita needs X, A, and Y, and so on and so forth. And how do I then, as a learning professional, how do I give the space to my learners to really judge for themselves if they're ready for that coaching journey? If they're ready for that transition moment, how do you give them that space? How do you give them that choice? So that's one area that I constantly am thinking of, and I'm trying to constantly figure out how to give them that ability to choose, how to give them that ability to make it their own decision of seeking a coaching opportunity, as opposed to it being awarded to them There's a concept.
Totally get that. They need to be wanting to undergo coaching rather than some leaders saying you need to go through coaching. Totally.
Right. Yeah. So those are some things that I thought.
Poonam, you have your hand up.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Just a few thoughts that got triggered when I was hearing Ipshita's.
Sure.
So a couple of things that I have tried in organizations which have helped me with some of the dilemmas I listed. One is this concept of peer coaching networks, which really helps you overcome some of the challenge around the affordability and the scalability of coaching efforts. Because you kind of organize peers into these tight circles who then meet with a certain frequency. You facilitate a few of them, put some ground rules in place, and then by and large, the group kind of takes care of each other. So which is something that's worked for me in the past, and it is something worth trying. I think the other thing I was thinking of when I was listening to Ipshita was this whole concept of what I call facilitative leadership, and I'm sure it has different names in different contexts. But I was also thinking how the world we operate in today, I think the word used now, or the acronym used now is Be Now or Bani. We've kind of moved away from the VUCA words. Yes, so you're looking at brittle, non-linear, anxious, and incomprehensible. And if you look at some of the qualities required to kind of deal with the Bani world, stuff around resilience, stuff around empathy and mindfulness, stuff around context and adaptivity, transparency and intuition, these are not hard, tangible skills, right? And in that context, the ability for a leader, and the leader could be at different levels in the organization, to kind of trigger self-reflection, act as a mirror, be the catalyst, becomes so much more integral to that journey that an employee undergoes in an organization. So just a couple of thoughts running through my head as I was listening to Ipshita speak. Yeah.
Sure. So here are some things that I'm taking away, and probably I'll lead that into my next question. In organizations, even till date, it is offered to a targeted population: senior exec, leaders, high potential, women, employees going through a transition. There is some targeting of an employee for whom the coaching is offered. I'm also hearing the terms mentoring, coaching, pseudo coaching being very closely knit, and we are using a broad term intervention, wherein it is a mix of all of this. Probably training is also part of it, and group coaching is also part of it that is being offered. If I were to now ask you, given that it is still offered to a select, what can we do, both organizations and coaches? What can we do to democratize coaching and make it available to everyone from the day one in organization till they say goodbye?
I think I'll go first if that's okay. I think there are multiple things that can be done. I don't think that we are in a selfless society where I can be a coach and I say, what, come, let me give you free information. And I don't also think that a recipient is waiting for free gyan, which often is what people think of. If I say, what, come be coached. I think it's about balancing the costs that you invest. And I say cost not just in terms of the monies in it, but also in terms of the investment of time, the investment of effort, the investment of energy and attention. And all of these are critical resources in any organization, right? How do we balance that out? I think it's always going to be a struggle between where do I invest my 80% and get an 80% revenue? Where do I invest 20% and get my 20% revenue? So that balancing act, the way I see it is, if there are ways or toolkits that allow somebody to start that self-discovery process, if there are toolkits, videos, self-help guides that allows somebody to start thinking about being better aware. And that can be distributed to a large number of people. And that's what we've done in a lot of my organizations. We've had walkthroughs, we've had self-awareness questionnaires built out in various fields, both tangible and intangible. We've had guides that allow somebody to think a little more beyond the daily routine work that they are doing as a kickoff. The other thing that we have done is in terms of offering a choice. Being a coach also is as much a career step as receiving coaching is.
Yeah.
So how do we package that in a way that it's taken in the same measure of esteem to be a coach as much as it is to receive coaching? And then create those platforms where people can offer their coaching guidance. And then there are people who also are seeking for it. So in one of my organizations, we actually built a platform that allowed an individual to nominate themselves as a coach. I don't need to wait for my manager to endorse me as a coach. I don't need to wait for the organization to endorse me as a coach. I feel I'm great at speaking. So I want to be a coach on communication skills, for example, as my development opportunity. So we built that platform where individuals were able to solicit, were able to advertise themselves as coaches in specific niches. Mm-hmm. And there are employees who can come in and vote or select the coaches for themselves basis those specific niches, right? And the tool was built in a way that it was level agnostic. It was because I don't believe that coaching is only possible from someone who's at a senior level to someone who's at a junior level. It was level agnostic. It was any demographic agnostic. And it received a lot of takers because here we're talking about individuals connecting on a one-on-one basis in a large organization where possibly they wouldn't have crossed paths. So it worked wonders there. And then, of course, there are situations where you need to have, very specific, very targeted coaching interventions provided, the opportunity for the coaching intervention to be provided. For example, I have a new CEO, for example. How do I help the new CEO adjust better into their role? Or I have a new transformative leader in the globe somewhere who's sent me a new charter to follow. How do I help my teams get to that charter? How do I help my teams be agile and all of the fancy wonderful words that leader is using at this point in time? So those are situations where I would, of course, go that very selective route, open it up to a certain group of people in that organization or in that little view, or open it up to a certain level of the organization where you're giving them that exposure and that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Sheenam.
So I have some very different views to this, Shanti. I think a fresher who joins in, even a middle manager, I'm not sure if the person is ready for coaching. To me, there is a phenomenal difference between mentoring and coaching. A new person joins in, needs a buddy, needs somebody who will help her or him settle down into the organization. There has to be a mental makeup, like this was discussed in the previous panel also. There has to be a mental makeup of a person to be ready for coaching.
Yeah.
A person needs to have a degree of self-awareness of her strengths and of her weaknesses, her areas of improvement, to be able to figure out, yes, I can be coached and I want coaching. You have to seek out coaching, right? So an organizational framework where an organization is helping people become better at a particular job, to me is more mentoring because it comes from an experience of another person who's good at that job. The way I would seek out a coach and the way I have sought out coaches in my own professional journey is when I want a mirror. And thank you, Johnny, for using that word. But, for me, my coaches are people who would sit across the table and say, oh, so this is what you're saying. Really? And paraphrasing it again for me? No. That's not what I'm saying. So a coach has to have the ability to be a little bit more disengaged. A coach doesn't need to be experienced in what I need help on.
Yeah.
But a coach really needs to help me become a better version of myself as I want to be. The first time I took personal coaching was, in two avatars before this, and it was identified by my manager then. But he told me, this is what I think you should be coached on. And we went on, I was coached on that, but on multiple other things. And I still remember Karthik did a phenomenal job of introducing me to what is the power of coaching, and which eventually led on to me becoming a coach myself.
Awesome.
But I think the organizations at large have to differentiate between the mentoring piece and the coaching piece, and realize that not everybody is ready to be coached. Even at very senior leadership levels, you would have people who are very resistant to hearing themselves back, and then they are uncoachable, right? So those two programs are very different. Now, at an organization level, I would think you could do coaching at a team level, you could do coaching at individual levels, you could do coaching as part of special programs. Like you run a year-long leadership intervention, you could have some coaching assignment in that. You could have a coaching assignment for women programs, like Ipsita talked about. But in my mind, there is a big differentiation between what you do to improve a person in a particular journey of her or his career from a technology, business domain, etc., and where you change the mantras of leadership itself and self-awareness from a coaching perspective. That's how I would differentiate and leverage the two.
Absolutely. Very different perspective, Shinam. You're saying offer what the employee needs. They may need mentoring, offer them that. They may need coaching, offer them that. They may just need a buddy, offer them that. Don't try and make it available to everyone. Lovely. Poonam, any perspective you want to add on to?
So I was listening to Ipshita on using technology and tools to kind of democratize access to coaching. And at Dr. Reddy's, we have an internal talent marketplace tool that does that. So it does allow people to put themselves out there, listing areas that they want to be coached on. And the other way around, it allows people to offer themselves as coaches. But I think there is a piece of work that, like in all areas of HR, needs to supplement the hardware, right? So what technology does is kind of provide the hardware, but there's a software to it. And part of that alludes to what Shinam was talking about, which is this whole thing about readiness, acceptance, self-awareness, and also some myths that need busting. For example, initially when the talent marketplace went active, you immediately realized that the coaches who were being sought out were the senior folks in the organization, right? So how do you break some of these mental models that coaching means it has to come from, someone who's at the executive committee or executive committee -1. So there is a piece of work that needs to happen around the technology and the tools that kind of facilitates greater scale and access to coaching inputs, which is also important in the journey.
Thank you, Poonam. Shinam, you mentioned that you spend some time identifying these external coaches, seeing the right pair with the employee. If I may ask you, what is it that you look for in this external coach? So indirectly, I'm asking, what should we do to get hired? Please answer that for us.
Difficult question. I think what I look for when I was, looking at a set of people that I would want to hire is alignment or congruence of values, if I may use that word, right? I think that's very, very important. At Broadridge, for example, we're a very family-based, loyalty-driven organization at the cusp of transformation. We have grown from 400 to 5,000 people. And we are now saying we won't grow as much. But now the next growth S-curve is really in terms of value, in terms of showcasing that, the GCC itself is moving from a level 3 to the level 4, which is the highest potential of a GCC. And if you have to get there, you need people who can operate with leaders who believe they have transformed themselves, but have a long journey ahead of them and are hungry, right? So that congruence of value is something that is really, really important. Somebody who understands what I want is able to paraphrase it back to me and say, okay, this is the problem statement. These are the 4 things that we would do. An approach of coaching is very important. Like the organization that we finally went ahead with had a tool, where you would go and play a game, and then you would get, first you did a 360, then they actually did an interview process, and they came back to each individual leader without me, okay, as to what their fitment was, where they found gaps. Then the process was that the coachee gets to develop their own development plan, and then there's a game they play. So there's interventions of different kinds, which kind of helps in a holistic development over the course of the year, right? And that, I think, was something that was really that stuck, if I may use it. I've never been exposed to that kind of a science to the art of coaching, Alan, if you remember the art and science of coaching. And that appealed to me. And that's why I made that decision. So I can tell you why I made that decision.
Yeah. Thank you. Poonam, Ipsita, anything you have to add? How do you identify external coaches?
If I may go, to be very honest, the market is huge. The choice is massive as well. There are plenty of coaches to choose from. So oftentimes it really boils down to finding someone who's curious to know about your organization or the people in your organization that need to go through the coaching. So I typically value a lot of questions being asked to me in terms of what this individual, where is the individual currently placed, what kind of career position they are in at this point in time, what could be the potential challenges that we are hearing as HR, from HR business partners, from learning business partners. So that curiosity to know a little bit more really helps me feel like, okay, this person is going to take the effort to act as a mirror. This person is thinking through what this particular employee might need in the organization. Cost is definitely a factor for sure. So being very transparent, very clear about how much this is going to cost me is something that I appreciate a lot. And I think the third thing that I appreciate a lot is if this person is able to give me some examples of situations where this person has been able to bring in a change, bring in a different mindset, a different thought process, and how they made that challenge, how they brought that forward. And it can be very generic. I don't expect somebody to tell me, there was this X person who I coached and this is how I coached that person. But really, what is their approach? Similar to what Sheenam was talking about, the congruence of values, the congruence of approach as well is something that I'm looking for. The fourth thing that I always think of is I know the person that needs to be coached, the personality that person brings or carries. So I try and see if I can find a mirror of that, or if I can find somebody who can challenge that personality in a positive way. So I try and see if I can make that match between the person who I want to receive the coaching and the person who is a potential coach. Those are something that I'm thinking of.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in addition to what Sheenam mentioned about the value congruence with the individual and the organization, Ipsita spoke about curiosity, and I would just add courage to that, because sometimes those debrief conversations with the line manager has some uncomfortable truths for the line manager himself, right? So I would add that dimension. But one of the things that I think I find the most difficult to find is a balance between a practitioner's approach and the academic perspective, and the ability to bring both together in a conversation. So there is an element of experience of the individual having been there, done that, and therefore being able to ask, the right questions, which kind of generate the right responses, which comes from the practitioner's perspective. But there is also an element where the individual needs to know what's happening, and this becomes more important, I think, in techno-functional coaching, where you're really looking at gaps that address functional competence in terms of the recent skills, frameworks, approaches, and the ability to bring both together. I have found it difficult to find people with the right combination of both. Usually, they're either good at one or the other.
Yeah, okay, valid. That brings me in the positive time, and probably tie that to the last question I have. Most organizations ask for an ROI. How do I know coaching will be helpful? Can you tell me what is this point A we are starting at? Where is this point B? What does measuring ROI for coaching mean to the three of you, and how do you expect coaches can help and support you in that journey?
I'll start. I think for me, Shanti, when my leader comes back and tells me, Sheena, you told me this sometime back, and I kind of talked to my coach, and this is what happened in that coaching discussion. And I think I'm very aware of, what happened. That to me is ROI. And I'll give you a very live example of what happened today. I had a conversation with a leader, and I told him about 15 days back in a one-on-one. I said, I want you to talk to your coach about, this thing about in you that you have a small team. And that's why you believe that people are not being good to you. I believe it is much more deeper, and it's more you than anybody else around you. So what if somebody has 500 people and you have 150? You bring a very different value system, and that's why you report into me directly. But I want you to talk to your coach. Today in my one-on-one with him, he said, I spoke to him, and, we did a lot of onion peeling. And, this is what came out. This is where I feel good about things. This is where I don't feel good about things. To me, just the fact that he has realized what is not good, he would make a change, right? The fact that the coaching assignment has helped him figure that link with what was hidden in his subtle emotional state and bring it back to a more conscious emotional state is enough, right? And that to me, I was smiling when I heard that, really.
I'm smiling too, Sheena, and I'm hoping all HR and L&D and decision makers of when to bring coaching in, how to bring in external coaches should all be certified and trained coaches. That's
absolutely
the sense that trained coaches bring to see, what can and cannot be an ROI and be able to identify that. Ipsita and Poonam.
I'll let Poonam go first this time.
So when Sheenam was articulating her idea of what is ROI, the thought going through my mind was exactly what you said, Shanti. I mean, her ability to articulate it in that fashion is a function of the fact that she is a coach herself. And many of us work with business leaders who are not necessarily coming from that space. And I think that is a challenge that we encounter. So there will be people, of course, who believe in the process and who will seek these moments when the individual comes back and says, I realize that this is something that I need to do something about. But there will also be business leaders who will want something tangible at the end of the process. And and I'm sure Ipshita will have examples, but some of the things I've tried is to have a conversation around what would success look like, yeah, for the individual and for the business leader. Because at the end of the day, the coach would also want to feel that he has really contributed to the process. So in the coach's interest, sometimes spending a little bit of time on explaining what success looks like, trying to put it down as explicitly as possible helps. And that definition of success, again, need not be financial or commercial. It could be better engagement scores for my team. It could be better scores on being accessible as a leader. Whatever it is, that is something that we are hoping to address. But trying to pin that down at the beginning of the coaching relationship helps. It at least prevents these superficial conversations on trying to put a number to it, X $million or whatever it is. I mean, I must confess, I have done it sometimes, but
All L&D professionals, including me, are guilty. So I'm
yeah.
with you.
So, but we all know that that's not where the heart is. So yeah.
Thank you.
What Ipshita wants to hear personally versus what the business wants Ipshita to say is quite different oftentimes. So yeah, I mean, Poonam, you kind of articulated what I wanted to say really well. I want to share two instances of, of places where I've attempted to find or I articulate some ROI. There was this one example where there was a particular team who was trying to bring in business from the native business area, and some of the challenges that they were facing were in terms of the leaders not being assertive or not being able to push their ideas through. Some of the other challenges that they were facing was in terms of the multiple exchange of communication that happened, that was necessary between the different teams working, because there was no clarity in the communication. There were a lot of miscommunications that were happening and things like that. So what we did was, over a period of 6 months prior to the program, we tried and looked at how many meetings were set up for each project. So for one project idea, and that was a very mathematical calculation, we risked it, but we did it because I wanted to see if that would work, if that would help the business really see a number that, and if my belief that a number cannot be assigned to a coaching assignment is true or not. So we did that, and we did see a lot of change in the instances required, number of connects required, in the number of ideas that got pushed over a period of a year prior versus a year later after this coaching intervention was given in. That satisfied some of the leaders for sure. So that was one idea that I had tried. But it required extensive amount of effort, which again is cost, time, effort, energy, which I don't think is possible at all situations. It was a one-off situation that I could do that. The other thing that I try and do in my organizations, in the organizations that I work at, is I try and look at the succession pipeline. How many of them have been identified as people who need the coaching support? How many people have opted to ask for coaching support? And where in their career journey are they over a period of 2 to 3 years? And that's only possible if I'm around in that organization for a longer period of time for us to track that. But I have had a particular organization where I instituted this knowledge within the team, and they carried it forward, and they did see a certain difference in the number of promotions, for example, that they saw in people who were coached versus people who were not coached, in the duration it took for somebody to get to a larger scope of role, for example, between people who were coached and not coached. So over a period of time, perhaps it is something that we could look at measuring, but is that reflective accurately of the coaching intervention or not? I would say no. I don't think that is an accurate reflection. It is a compulsion that you may want to give in to, indulge in some circumstances, but these are some examples that I could think of. Most of the times, the way I convince my business leaders about the value of investing in the coaching experience is like Sheenam said. Really, Sheenam and Poonam, both of them alluded to what does success look like for you, and also making them aware that success in a coaching intervention cannot come within 6 months, cannot come in a finite number of sessions.
3 sessions.
Correct.
4
It is
sessions.
not a capsule that I can pop and voila, I'm all knowledgeable. So, giving them that, educating my leaders as well has been a huge effort, almost equal effort that I need to put in educating my leadership team versus the effort I'm putting into scout for a coach and assign a coach and track that, coaching intervention. So, yeah, I think that's what I can talk about.
Thank you, Ipsita, Sheenam, Poonam, for sharing your hopes, sharing your challenges, sharing what you're going through, and educating us coaches on what happens on the other side of the table. So thank you so much. Kunal, we have time for one question. Which is the lucky question before we wrap up the session?
So, to be honest, a lot of questions have been answered in the chat itself. There's one question where someone wanted to know, like, what is the distribution of different sorts of coaching, which is remedial to transition to hypo, like, what kind of domains do you see?
It actually depends on where your organization is at. If it's a fledgling organization, the distribution percentages would differ. If it is a legacy organization going through a transformative period, it would differ. So there's no one finite number, in my opinion. I think it depends on where that organization is at that point in time.
And what your goals are. And what your goals are, right? Yeah. I may in a period of 18 months do a particular kind of coaching, next 18 months do something else. So it depends on what your goals are and how do you want coaching to really help you build your transformation story.
Thank you so much. Heartfelt gratitude and sincere thank you.
Before you wrap up,
please.
Before you wrap up, though, there was one question that was asked in the chat, and I think that plays on a lot of coaches' minds. Is it cost that defines the decision? No, I want to emphatically say that it's a no. And the reason I say that is already in the chat, so feel free to go and refer. Sheenam has responded to it. But I want to let you all know that cost is not the only deciding factor.
Not the only, but a significant deciding factor. Does that hold true?
I wouldn't say it's a significant factor also. I think it's one of the equally important factors as others. Poonam, Sheenam, I don't know how you feel, but for me, it is always that.
So I think for me, it's other things being equal that comes into play. But would I compromise on some of the other things we spoke about, like the congruence of values over cost? I wouldn't, because I'm really being penny wise and pound foolish if I do that, right?
Shanti, I went with the more expensive organization. So to me, if you want to invest in coaching and you want to really make that investment, I don't think cost comes into the picture. If you're doing an outbound learning program, and there is mass volume involved, yes. But if you're investing in a certain set of people and they're critical for your transformation, you won't be wanting to invest on cost. You're just running a program for the sake of running it because it's, a part of your L&D strategy.
Having said that, we do negotiate on costs. So don't come to a conversation.
We did it too.
That's your role. Yeah.
There is a procurement team in every company. There's a procurement team and a purchase team in every company.
Correct.
So, yeah. There's also a question on ChatGPT or ChatGPT and AI. They are very far away from coaching. Please, guys. ChatGPT is an open AI, generative AI model for large language processing. Shit in, shit out, good things in, good things out. Okay? It's as simple as that. Please do not confuse the value that you bring to the table. No AI model will be able to ask the same kind of questions that you guys ask us. Okay, nobody.
Thank you.
Please
I'm going to truncate these last few minutes and replay it over and over again. Over to you, Kunal. Let's wrap up.
Yeah, so great session. Thank you, panelists. May I request you for just a picture if I can take? I missed it in maybe just a second there. Thank you. It's done. And now I'd invite Jayashree to conclude today's session. And just a quick one about Jayashree. She is Vice President of our chapter, brings in 24 years of experience as well, and obviously a coach, an XLRI alumnus, and works significantly in gender equality and transformational spaces. So over to you, Jayashree, for a vote of thanks and conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kunal. And it's absolutely amazing to be here today. We have, I think, had an amazing start to ICW 2023 in India. And our 7 panelists have been phenomenal. We've touched both ends of the conversation, I think. One is, of course, as coaches, exploring the potential within us, and with our organizational panel, exploring potential for coaching in organizations. And I love the authenticity with which all our panel members shared today. And I was reading a quote this morning, and it said that it is said that inside every seed is the potential for an incredible harvest. And I'm sitting with that quote through both the discussions today, which is that, how exactly does the seed know what its potential is? Is it ready? Is it willing to take the journey? Does the seed know what harvest it's going to be? Yeah. And as an organization, there is a forest. It's not just one seed. So how do organizations make the most of coaching as a tool available for them to ensure that the forest as a whole has a thriving harvest? And I was listening to some of the panelists talk about, looking for value congruency with coaches, looking for coaches who can truly maybe even question their own existing models and constructs, and look at how best they can partner with the organization, from maybe self-coaching tools and techniques that they can empanel leaders with. How do they empanel leaders to be coaches further down the organization within the context of budget and other constraints that organization might have? So absolutely wonderful. And I think maybe in some form, we could have flipped the panel, because a lot of the questions that our esteemed organizational folks raised were also addressed by our amazing MCC panel earlier in the day. So thank you, Alan, Lenny, and Nikhil, for really candid sharing about your own journeys and how you work with coaches. And Poonam, Ipshita, and Sheenam, we are going to hold on to all your words about, especially the last one, about how cost doesn't matter, how you're focused on coaching for your organization. This is going to be on YouTube, on our chapter YouTube, and the coaches are going to love it. So thank you so much for all your perspectives, and a great round of appreciation to Shanti, our learning director at the board, and ably support.
We
Jayashree,
lost
you went
you,
on mute.
Jayashree.
Hit a
Gone on
mute.
mute, I think.
So I'm saying Shanti, and ably supported by Kunal and Mandar today. Wonderful, wonderful ICW today. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for joining us today at ICF Bengaluru Chapter.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you, Jayashree. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you, all of you. Great job done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Participants.
Thanks, Shanti. Really great panel.
Thank you,
today.
Jayashree.
Thank
them.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Bye.
Wonderful discussion today, Shanti.
Love the panels. Both panels are very nice.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kunal. I know Mandar had to drop.
And team Bengaluru, congratulations. Splendid work. I guess just not the session, but even the very beautiful dessert that Jayashree served in the form of conclusion and the summarization. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just one feed forward, if you could just enable save the chat, that will really help. Because, you know, all these questions, the chat moves so fast, it'll be good for reflection for us in the
Okay.
session. Yeah.
Can I do that now?
You can do that now. The chat would have got saved at the end already.
Huh?
But when you are setting up the session, you have to just have a permission there that, you know, chats to be saved. So that will really help.
Good feedback. Thank you. Yeah, I know it
We
gets
can
saved
print out
but
from
for
Zoom
recording.
now, Shanti.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Santi. Thank you. Good night.